2025 was a mess for me, especially when it came to anything writing related. I haven't gotten nearly as much done as I wanted, and I'm still a little disappointed about that as I had big plans that didn't happen. I'm just imagining characters in my stories holding me at gunpoint right now asking me where their stuff is. So we're going to talk about that. Fair warning, I'm going to yap a lot. This might be a bit long-winded. I will try to structure this in a way that is digestible and coherent and isn't just unhinged ramblings for 20 minutes. I apologize in advance if that's not the case. Let's go. So I haven't done a dedicated video talking about the Renegades series on this channel yet, and I'm not sure why. I should have probably made a video talking about that series instead of starting with Tales of the EDGEWORLDS, since Renegades was first. The original idea for Renegades was actually a comic that I had come up with along with some friends years ago, but we all sucked at drawing and writing back then, to be honest. The original version of this, it was pretty terrible. But I mean, we were young and writing whatever we thought was cool, usually things we saw in early 2000s games and movies and cartoons, with very little thought put into how they would mesh together, or if they even could. I would just have a scrolling list of things that inspired it back in the day. Some of these influences are still there, some more than others. Even after we all just naturally grew apart with age and, life, the idea just kind of sat in the back of my head for a while, so I started rewriting and redoing things to try and make it better, and more of its own thing instead of just copying other properties that we like. Ran into a problem though. I can't draw very well. I'm not even at like funny, silly shitpost webcomic level. I'm pretty bad at it. Which is funny because I can make things in Blender better than I can try and draw them by hand or on a tablet. I don't get it. But I enjoyed writing, and I'd like to think I'm at least decent at it. So I decided maybe I could turn the story into a series of novels, and that's where we are now. Some things are very different from the original idea. Some characters got axed or combined together, or just completely different from what they originally were. But to give a rundown, Renegades is a sci-fi series following a team of characters trying to protect their world from evil. It's set in an alternate dimension where the planet Earth is called Terra. There's a reason for that, but it's a spoiler that I will get to eventually. Anyway, Terra is inhabited by sapient animals called Terrans, or at least it was just them, until humans, in an attempt to get to another planet after Earth became a barren wasteland, accidentally crossed over into their dimension in a special prototype ship and arrived on their doorstep. Things were peaceful with the two until they weren't, and a global war happened, but ultimately, everyone decided, you know what? Things were cooler when we weren't trying to kill each other, and eventually everyone got along, or at least most of them agreed to stop trying to kill each other with mechs and sci-fi weapons. Yeah, there are mechs, don't worry about it. 50 years later is where our story starts, and like I said, it's a group of characters that end up becoming vigilantes that team up to defend their world from supervillains. Yeah, the comic book and manga influence is still there, if you couldn't tell by the covers, and the fact that I referred to them as volumes. At one point I was going to release the first book a few chapters at a time and then release all the chapters as a book in a single volume like later, but for one reason or another I just didn't do that. Although I kind of did that for EDGEWORLDS, I released 2 of the stories on my site and then saved the other 2 for the book release. But Volume 1 Rise came out in 2021 and Volume 2 Blackout came out in June of 2024. And I just realized in 5 months that will be 2 years old. Jeez, man, time, you gotta pump the fucking brakes a little bit. Anyway, Volume 2 was supposed to come out a lot sooner than it did. I made a bunch of mistakes, like announcing it too early and overestimating how long the editor was going to take to edit it. Because, and I know someone is going to call me an idiot for doing this, and you're right, I did not hire an editor for Volume 1. I edited the entire thing myself with the help of some beta readers, and if they end up watching this video, they're goated. Thank you all, seriously. But that was a nerve-wracking process, and even after multiple passes on my end, I still found embarrassing typos that I had to correct later after publishing it, like using the wrong version of die in the expression the die is cast.
What are you?
An idiot sandwich.
I still want to slap myself in the face for that one. There are moments in the back of my head that I felt like I was just polishing a giant turd. Even now, rereading Volume 1, there are still times where I'm like, why didn't I cut this down? Why did I structure this sentence that way? I am considering going back and modifying it again and releasing a second edition to fix things I'm still not happy with, and things I didn't notice, and so it's my first time publishing anything, and it was a learning experience at the end of the day. But that's a future me's problem. I say all that to say, I really did not want to edit an entire novel again by myself, because that left me mad stressed and anxious. And I kept thinking, there's probably a typo I'm missing and I'm gonna be embarrassed later when I notice it after I've already published it or something. But for book 2, I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna reach out to an editor. And I had found one because someone I know had recommended them to me. And things were going great, until they weren't. The editor ghosted me, twice. The first time they had a very valid reason. I'm gonna be vague because, you know, it's private stuff. Let's say a lot of things happen in their life that I would not wish on anyone, and it happened to them all at once, like one after the other around the same time. When they did get back in touch with me, they apologized profusely and promised to edit the rest of the story for free. For context, I had paid half up front. That was our agreement. So after that, they were churning out edits that were really good and definitely made the book better. But then they ghosted me again, and I don't know what happened. I cannot contact them anymore. I'm not even being hyperbolic when I say this. I don't know if they're even still alive at this point. On the social media, they did keep up because the account I was using to talk to them was deleted. No explanation why. But on the social media they do have that's still up, there's been no activity in years. I hope they are okay and doing better. I would say I'm not even mad anymore, but I'd be lying. That still kind of ticks me off a little bit. But that left me with roughly about a quarter of the novel left to edit. Thankfully, the person who recommended that editor in the first place helped me edit the end of the book, and then I did another pass on my own. I'm much happier with how Volume 2 turned out despite all of that, and I think it was 3 different delays. While I was dealing with the editor, I was already brainstorming book 3 and had an extremely rough draft of it done that I was then editing and revising on my own when waiting for the editor to send me stuff. I was also working on Tales of the Edgeworlds because I was feeling bad about the delays and also wanted to do something else in the meantime. So what does this have to do with me not having anything done in 2025? Well, because of changes being made to book 2 and feedback I got from the editor, I kept going back and forth changing things in volume 2 and then having to change things in the draft of volume 3 so everything lined up. And one of those changes required me to retool a lot of things I had outlined before and moved up the timetable on certain plot lines and adding several things to book 3 that I originally didn't plan on putting there. But looking back, it actually works. I am being vague in case anyone watching this wants to read Renegades 1 and 2 and hasn't yet, although it is a commitment because they are long as shit. Okay, to be fair, 2 is technically shorter than 1, but because of the 2 side stories I included that bridge the gap between Volume 2 and Volume 3, it ended up being longer. Full transparency, pacing is one of my weaknesses. I'm sure that won't come up later in this video.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
I am working on it. I did not intend for either of those books to be that long, which actually segues into talking about Volume 3. As I was revising Volume 3 and expanding parts of it that I had glossed over in the first draft, ended up getting bigger, especially because I had to expand and add things as a result of revisions to book 2. It got so big that I realized while revising the first half of the story that it would either be too long if I decided to improve and flesh out the second half the way I wanted, so the quality was the same as the first half, or it would feel half-baked and feel like it was moving way too fast without having any room to breathe. And neither option seemed really good to me. That's when I realized a solution. One that would make the workload easier and allow me to focus on the first half of the book better. With the way the story was structured anyway, there was an excellent point where I could slice this into 2 parts. And in hindsight, looking back, I should have done this with Volume 1, but I didn't. Definitely should have happened around the part where they were in Africa, because that would have been a good place to stop. Oh well. But I've always been cautious of splitting a story into parts because one thing you can end up doing if you aren't careful is having one part that is all set up and little to no payoff, and it feels like very little happened. And then the other part can have the opposite problem where it's all payoff and no setup and nothing is allowed room to breathe, which can make it so neither part really feels like a complete thing on its own. So I was hesitant to do that, but I realized it's either this or giving some of the Game of Thrones book a run for their money in terms of length. Again. So yeah, book 3 is gonna get split in 2. I'm still working on part 1, which I guess now is book 3, and then part 2 is book 4. Since I'm now just focusing on the first part of it, I've noticed more issues to fix or more things to improve, and I've been overhauling chunks of it to make it flow better. Hopefully. Once I've done that and I'm happy with it, I then need to track down a new editor, one that won't ghost me this time. I haven't begun looking for one yet. Again, that'll be a future me's problem.
When will you learn? When will you learn that your actions have consequences?
I need to get this draft to a level I'm comfortable with before I send it off to the editor slaughterhouse. I'm joking, editors are necessary. So, when is Renegades 3 coming? It's coming. I've learned my lesson to not announce a release date until I'm damn sure it's ready, or I can meet that deadline, or it'll be close to it. Ideally, I want it out this year, but I'm also entertaining the idea that it probably won't be done until 2027. So, stay tuned for that. But that's not the only thing I want to talk about. We gotta talk about the other series I'm working on. Alright, this is the one I was the most disappointed with, and the reason why there was only one short story released is hilariously stupid. At least I think it's hilariously stupid. I had tunnel vision and was hyper-focused on a concept that I really should have realized sooner would not work as a short story. I'm not going to give you the rundown on what Tales of the Edgeworlds is, as I've made 2 videos talking your head off about that. But I am going to talk about the 3rd story in Volume 1 called The Callisto Incident because it's relevant to the conversation. I'll post a time on screen that you can skip to because I do have to spoil the ending of that one, because what I want to talk about is linked to that, sorta. I'll give you a second to decide if you want to skip it or not. Okay, so the premise of the Callisto Incident was Edgy, Jeff, and Todd decided to lay low on a space station called Callisto Station that is a giant casino resort. There's a problem. It's run by a mafia, and Jeff's dumbass decided to go gamble. He got cleaned out and then had the brilliant idea to put up Edgy's ship that they are all living on as collateral. He lost that too. Edgy wanted to lay low because he was having trouble controlling his rage powers and had a bounty on his head. When he found out what Jeff did, his anger management problems only got worse. But in order to get the money so the mob wouldn't take his ship, Edgy had to take a job for his boss to nab a guy that was also on the station that had data on a weapon. Problem was, somebody in the intel department royally fucked up and didn't realize the guy they were trying to kidnap is the nephew of the mafia don. The same mafia running the station. Yeah, when they found out, shit hit the fan very quickly. One of the mobsters then blew up Edgy's ship right in front of him and he went ballistic. Literally. His powers got out of control and he leveled the station and sent it crashing into the planet below. Then he soloed an entire battalion of tanks before his powers almost killed him. That's the abridged version, there's a little more going on than that, but you'll have to read it if you haven't already. His boss rescued him, but was horrified with what happened and sent him to a bunch of witches to figure out what the hell his powers are and if there was a way that it could be controlled. I didn't include a story about what happened after that, and instead, the previous stories in the set take place way after this, for a reason. Because the idea of what happened there would be too big to fit in a short story. It would need its own novel, so I opted to put that on the back burner. Why is that relevant to EDGEWORLDS Volume 2? Well, because I ran into the exact same problem, but didn't arrive at the conclusion that this should just be a novel until it was far too late. Again, tunnel vision. I kept focusing on this concept instead of taking a break and working on something else. So the concept is a story where Edgy and the gang attempt a mega dangerous pub crawl. It's a challenge that most people die doing because the drinks are so strong and each bar is in a different dimension that has its own dangers. Drunken hijinks would ensue. Sounds like a recipe for some comedy. What could go wrong with a violent, short-tempered, gun-toting penguin getting absolutely blitzed? Everything, including the story itself. I'm not exaggerating when I say this, I have scrapped and redone this story at least 4 times now, and I'm not happy with any of these attempts. The first version got out of hand because I had the stupid idea of inserting a subplot with a cult on the station. This was on the station where the challenge starts at, and this cult was scheming to try to release some sort of ancient entity that likes to party and gets its subjects high. The cult roped Jeff into their plan by making him carry an artifact that was designed to free the entity if it's brought to each bar. Jeff didn't know what it was for and was only asked to hold on to it in exchange for some powerful weed. Also, there was an assassin that Edgy kinda had a thing for, even though they were kind of enemies, and she was after the artifact too, and when the artifact started to activate and break the seal, things went to shit, and Edgy and this assassin character had to team up to stop the entity from pulling everyone and everything in the station into its own pocket dimension, of which there would be no escape from. You see the problem, right? The bars became an afterthought, and it also wasn't as funny as I thought it would be. Although the action in it got pretty good, so that got scrapped. Version 2, instead of there being an assassin, she was this thief, kind of like Catwoman, femme fatale type character who had stolen a relic that was a key to some ancient treasure that was in one of the dimensions at the end of the pub crawl challenge. The people she stole the key from wanted it back and had followed her to the station to get it. At the same time, Edgy and crew were in the middle of the pub crawl challenge, having no idea any of this was going on, and she just showed up and decided to tag along with them for protection. It started out better than the previous one because a lot of the focus was on the different bars, and there was more comedy, mostly banter between Edgy and the thief character, because he was mad because she had outsmarted him at one point by getting him to think with the wrong head. But it ended up being really long, too long, and it ended up being in novella territory. And I started to not like the draft by the end either, so I scrapped it again. So I decided, you know what, cut out any subplots and just simplify things. Not every story needs to have some exciting action thing as part of it. Just have it be these characters going to different bars, and maybe some hijinks happen. So the cast ended up being Edgy, Jeff, Todd, Aurora, who was introduced in her own story, which was the only story I got out last year, and Helena, one of her sisters, and Dr. BG, who are characters from a story that was in Volume 1. This time, I wanted to focus on the dangers they ran into while hopping between bars, and also just interplay between the characters. Problem was, my biggest weakness, pacing, reared its ugly head, and the story ended up being too long again. So I tried cutting out Dr. BG from the plot and reduced the number of bars, but it was still too long, and some of the bars weren't given as much time as they needed when I tried to get it down to what is considered a short story length. And because of that, a lot of the funny antics that should have been the highlight ended up getting axed. Then I tried something else. I tried splitting the story into multiple ones, so that way each place had room to breathe. But that didn't work either, because I had trouble trying to end each part in a satisfying way. And I still felt like I was having to cut stuff out. And this is where I realized there was no way I was getting this into a bunch of short stories and be happy with them. So I decided this will all have to be a novel. Eventually. I'm sure Edgy's not happy with this story getting canned multiple times, and me not having anything but one of the stories that I had planned done last year.
I am talking scorched earth, motherfucker! I will massacre you! I will fuck you up!
I did have outlines for other stories that were going to be part of Volume 2, when I thought I would have enough to make one in 2025. But one of those stories, I am screaming at myself things that will get me banned on YouTube because I decided not to prioritize that one because it would have been really topical 3 months ago. The premise is Edgy and crew go to a giant space station that's basically one of those warehouse stores like Costco or Sam's Club. Like, picture one of those, but it's in space and it's the size of New York. The station doing this is having its Black Friday event, and they sell everything under the sun, including firearms and spaceships and tanks and a bunch of other things that no store in real life would actually sell to you. I don't think. Since the Edgeworlds are so lawless, take the normal Black Friday chaos and madness where people are brawling and fighting over frivolous shit that they probably won't care about that much in 4 months. But murder is okay and always on the table, and you're allowed to bring whatever weapons you want. And some of those weapons would probably be considered WMDs if they actually existed in the real world. And you have a recipe for disaster. Or comedy, depending on your mindset. That's the premise. There's a little more to it than that, but I don't want to spoil it, and also because things might change from the outline when I start actually writing the draft and go back and revise everything. So the roadmap for that series is there are 2 novels coming eventually. One of them involving the witches and Edgy learning how to control his powers, or trying to. And that one is going to get a little high fantasy. I think I have some more of my notes that Edgy might ride on a dragon. The other novel involves cosmic alcoholism. Cosmic alcoholism, that's actually a good title. I need to write that one down. That's got a nice ring to it. Apologize to your liver. Cosmic alcoholism. An Edgeworlds novel. Coming at some point. TBA? Yeah, TBA. Let's just go with that. Okay, joking aside, there's more stories coming. Ones that'll be on the site and will then get bundled into a collection later. Hopefully this year. Hopefully. Stay tuned. I've got some plans for at least 2 that involve Mika, but those are not even close to being drafts yet, and are really just ideas written down that I haven't even really outlined, so I don't want to say anything yet. You know, I don't want to give you guys false expectations with that. So yeah, that's my long-winded explanation of how 2025 went for me in terms of writing projects. And my, is it fair to call them plans at this point for 2026? More like a concept right now, more like a wish list rather than a plan. There's other ideas for stuff I was tempted to talk about, but since they're so up in the air that the concepts could change on a dime, I'm not gonna mention them here. And maybe when they're more ironed out, I'll talk about them in another video. I mean, there's no reason why I can't make more of these, right? Thanks for watching. If you sat through this whole unhinged ramble, don't know how long this will end up being, but if you sat through all of it, thank you. Consider checking out the books if you haven't already, and check out the only new Edgeworld story as of right now. You can find it on my website, link in the description. I'm still working on the Shadow of the Colossus video, so look forward to that. I'm still trying to get it out this month. But let me know what you guys think of this video. Would you like to see more of them like this? I was thinking of doing one on my writing process and the chaotic, unhinged mess that is. That could be fun, maybe.